So we are hitting that stage of the summer where Leeds United are being linked with players every single day from all over the shop. And that has again been the case today and for the past couple of days with one specific player being mentioned time and time and time again. So I'm going to get into who this player is and why it would be a massive mistake to make a move for them and why we really need to stick to the strategy that we did last season because this would be a terrible move. So, just going to sort of introduce their story. They, last season, were playing for Bayern Munich, had a few minutes, but the new sort of leadership at Bayern Munich weren't fancying them too much. So they played 18 appearances, 360 minutes, which isn't a ton. They got a goal and 3 assists in that time, but it's not exactly a huge return, and you can tell there's a little bit of a rift between Vincent Kompany and his leadership and this winger, which is never the best thing to have. It's, a little bit atrocious. Then, as a result, they were loaned out to Eintracht Frankfurt, which is a reasonable side towards the top of the Bundesliga, so you'd expect, okay, not quite Bayern Munich, but you should be able to break into the side there, because a lot of the players at Eintracht Frankfurt have either been with the club for a long time or are fairly replaceable. The thing is, he's had 9 appearances for them. He has had 4 appearances for them in the Bundesliga, 4 appearances in the Europa League, and 1 appearance in the DFB Pokal, which is their equivalent of the FA Cup. Now, in that Pokal appearance, they played 67 minutes and scored 1 goal, and that was genuinely fantastic. But the reason that they have only played 9 matches is because if they were to creep over into a 10th match, they would have to join Eintracht Frankfurt permanently, and Eintracht Frankfurt do not want to sign this guy. They really don't. Like, he was, in the past, incredibly highly rated at Bayern Munich. Everyone thought, next big thing, all this kind of stuff. But then Bayern Munich went, well, we don't want him, so load him to Eintracht Frankfurt with the idea of him going permanently. At this point, Frankfurt like, well, we don't want him permanently. Bayern are thinking, well, we don't want him back, we don't want to cover those wages. And the player is just sort of stuck in limbo at 2 clubs that don't necessarily want him. Which doesn't say the best of things for his quality, and now this is where I begin to pull a little bit of a switcheroo, because the clubs that I'm talking about aren't, in fact, Bayern Munich. It's Liverpool, and it's Aston Villa, and it's Harvey Elliott. And a lot of people recently have been talking about how Harvey Elliott is a player that Leeds United need to sign, because in the past he's been so incredibly promising and all this kind of stuff, and he was the next big thing, and he's very clearly shown a lot of talent in seasons past. But if I were to tell you that that Bundesliga player was someone that we were signing for, and this is the number that has been quoted quite a lot recently, £25 million. If I were to tell you that we were looking at signing a player that played 360 minutes 2 seasons ago, and then last season played a grand total of 9 games of football because their club didn't want them anymore, you would say absolutely not. And Aston Villa, if Harvey Elliott were to stick around, would have had to pay 35 million quid for him. That was the deal that was agreed at the start of the loan. The idea being, they'll loan him in, they'll find him really, really, really good, and then they'll pay 35 million quid once they've found him really good because they really like him, and then he'll have a nice new home, Liverpool will have a decent chunk of money, everything works out. And that's where the problem lies, because at the end of the day, Harvey Elliott was no better than an Emi Buendia. Buendia got a hell of a lot of minutes last season, and Buendia, at the end of the day, is a player that has played a significant amount of championship football that we nearly signed last summer for significantly less than that £35 million that Aston Villa nearly almost had to sign him for. And considering that he's apparently only lost £10 million of value in the last year, that's incredibly surprising. And for me, that is an insanely high fee for a player that has played that little football recently. It's nuts. If I have a quick look at the amount of times he was actually in the Aston Villa squad last season, he was in their squad in the league a total of 11 times. This is across both Premier League and no, is his time at Liverpool and his time at Aston Villa. Sorry, a little bit of confusion there. So out of the 11 times that he was in a squad, he was in the Liverpool squad 3 times. Out of the sort of 5 starts he had in the Premier League, not even starts, the 5 appearances he had in the Premier League last season, one of them was with Liverpool. The others, he got 19 minutes against Everton, he got 32 minutes against Sunderland, he got 45 against Fulham, and then he was on the bench twice, and then he wasn't even in the squad for the bulk of the season from that point. From that point onwards, he only played once, which was against Brentford for 13 minutes, when he came on as an attacking midfielder and did very little. For me, this is all a sign that we need to keep following our existing transfer strategy, because we're at the stage of the transfer window where everyone is looking at a variety of players that are desperate for a move. Example, Harvey Elliott. And looking at players that their agents are trying to push for a move. And various sort of, I'm going to use journalists here because realistically that's not what we're talking about. Journalists would be people that seek the truth. These are more people that write stories with the idea that the stories have to be clicked on. In the event of Harvey Elliott, it's people going, Harvey Elliott wants a move, Leeds want a winger / number 10, Leeds want Harvey Elliott, which is a tenuous link that's come out of literally nothing, or the agent sort of whispering in their ear, we kind of want to make a move to Leeds United, which isn't how journalism should work. But this is where I'm sort of desperately hoping that we follow the strategy that we did last season, which was more affordable signings from leagues across Europe, because that's what we did. We signed Perry from France, we signed Stack from Germany, we signed Mecha, I believe, also from Germany. He might have been at Wolfsburg beforehand, but he was on a free. It's a bit of a confusing one. Gabby Goodmanson, also from France. Make deals from leagues that aren't going to charge us ridiculous amounts of money, such as £25 million for Harvey Elliott, and we'll still get the same level of quality, because good quality footballers do exist. We are very good at sniffing out bargains, and I think as long as we don't fall into that trap of thinking, well, we paid £18 million for players last year, why aren't we paying 25, 30, 35, 40 million pounds for players this summer, then we'll be fine. The risk is if we fall into that trap of thinking bigger number is better player, because we all know that in the world of football that isn't strictly the case. The amount of money that Liverpool threw at players last year, Isak, Ekatike, and they're good footballers, don't get me wrong. But, another example, between them, I think off the top of my head, there's about £300 million of fees there, and they didn't do too well. And if you have a look at Chelsea, they didn't do too well. And again, they just threw cash at various players. Liam Delap was, I think, 30 million quid, whereas Calvert-Lewin was free. We need to stick with our strategy of being sensible, being smart, and not making the big, high-money mistakes that I genuinely believe Harvey Elliott would be. This was a little bit of a weird video. The idea being that I would sort of introduce you to the concept of the player before the player, which I hope got the message across. Let me know if it did or didn't. I'm kind of a little bit curious about that. But I'm just sort of ultimately thinking, if we sign Harvey Elliott, that would shake me more than the fact that we didn't get a 10/winger last summer. Because that's actively making a bad decision as opposed to failing to make the good one, if that makes sense. Anyway, weird rambly video, but I'm going to leave that there. If you enjoyed, please pop a like on it. That's always massively appreciated. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Become a channel member too. That's always fun. Hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you later. Toodaloo.